thank you all for being here. Welcome to the New Hampshire Network's, I believe it's the third annual legislative preview, in this case for 2025, which is where we invite eminent guests to provide us with an inside view of what's coming up in this session's environment, energy, and climate-related bills. I am Ryan Mars-Eidler, a member of the steering committee of the New Hampshire Network for Environment, Energy, and Climate. Our guests hardly need an introduction, but nevertheless, I will introduce them very briefly. As soon as I have finished reminding us that this event does take place in Ndakina, meaning our land, which is the ancestral homeland of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wabanaki peoples, past and present. We acknowledge and honor the land, the waterways, and the people who have stewarded Ndakina throughout the generations. The event is being recorded, and everyone who registered will receive a link to the recording as soon as it's ready. And as always, let's keep our microphones on mute. Please do use the chat function to send us your questions and comments. Now, one of the objectives of these legislative preview events is to encourage folks to get involved, make your voices heard in the democratic process, and which is easy to do online, even when it's not easy to get to Concord to give live testimony, which is always great. People who can actually be there during the sessions and give live testimony, that's the strongest. But failing that, we want as many people to get involved in making your voices heard. So this session will end with my colleague, John Gage, giving us a quick 5-minute tour through the New Hampshire General Court website for anyone who is unsure about how it works. And that will immediately follow my other colleague, Susan Richmond's ever-popular Coming Attractions summary. So that is the order of events. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our esteemed guests in the reverse order that they will speak. Representative Tony Kaplan is with us once again. He represents Merrimack District 8 and currently serves on the Science, Technology, and Energy Committee in the House. Representative Wendy Thomas represents Hillsborough, District 12, and also serves on the Science, Technology, and Energy Committee. And Senator David Waters of Dover has represented Senate District 4 since 2012, I believe, and is currently serving on the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, Finance Committee, and Capital Budget Committee. So, Senator Waters, I would like to invite you to begin by giving us what the landscape looks like from your point of view and what's coming up that we will be interested in.
Well, thanks so much, and it's good to see everybody, even by Zoom. When I was first contacted, I was told to focus more on natural resources bill, but I'll give a quick overview of most everything that I know at this point is before our committee. Let me say that we have two new members to House Energy and Natural Resources. We've got Cindy Rosenwald, who, a lot of it has to do with scheduling, and so she's now on to Energy and Natural Resources without much background in it. But we have also Mark McConkie, who has come over from the House and certainly knows a lot through the public works side and municipal aspects as well. And he'll be particularly good on that committee in terms of a lot of environmental. I think in general that in the Senate, we are going to have a lot of bipartisanship and a lot of collegiality. That committee tends to work together very well and with other senators in both parties to do things. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of partisanship when it comes to the energy things. I'll also say by way of introduction that we are waiting to see where the governor stands on things. I've had conversations with Department of Energy folks and with others in her circle, and she's obviously focused on the budget right now because she has to do her budget message on the 15th. So on the campaign trail, there seemed to be some interest and willingness to rethink some of the net metering limits and some other matters as well, but we just really don't have any indication of that. I think, he's requested meeting, but it's just likely to be after the 15th for that.
Wednesday, 1, 2, even 3 inches from the previous hours through Wednesday evening.
We're all set? Okay.
Yep, sorry about that.
It's okay. So let me be very briefly on some of the environmental bills first, the natural resources. We have a bill, and I can't remember if it was Rishardi or Birdsall to put 25 million into the water treatment. So we'll have that. And then we have several bills that are all arising out of the issues at Fish and Game. I had the study committee last summer with Representative Spillane and others, because there's about a $4 million shortfall in their funding. And there have been some things that have been patched together in the past. We're looking at ways in which we can provide more resources to Fish and Game and have some things funded by the general fund, because their fee structure and they just can't sustain themselves. I have a couple of bills that are around the boat decal program to make sure that funding from the boat decals goes for the sole purpose of the public boat access ramp program, because there have been some talk about trying to move that funding into other purposes, and also a proposal for a new decal on the marine side, that might help provide some funding for marine environmental issues. There's also Senator Lang has a bill that would dedicate some additional funding for Fish and Game, that the money that they receive from federal sources, the interest on that has been going into the general fund, but he would say that the interest from the federal grants and programs would actually go into the Fish and Game fund, which could be some considerable money over time. To be some septic things. I haven't, there's, because of the filing issues, only about 80 of the Senate bills are visible right now, of the 320 or so that were filed. So there may be other things that I am not aware of on shoreline things, and setbacks and development and other things. There is the bill on how you account for wetlands areas within building lot size minimums, that is going to get some folks stirred up. So that one I do know about. So on to energy. I'll just say, as the chair of our offshore wind commission, that I just think everything is going to be stalled until we see what the executive orders really mean. And it is interesting that the lease areas that were auctioned off in October, the contracts were signed in early January. So they have the contracts for those lease bidders have been finalized. It's about 8.3 gigawatts out there that are in these initial lease areas, about a 30 gigawatts plus in the areas that it could eventually be included in offshore wind. But obviously that's all on hold, because even with the contracts, the Trump administration will stop all the environmental review or make it so complicated that it'll never get done. It's kind of what they did the last time, and took us a couple of years to recover from that. There are a lot of red states that are doing wind, so I'm not really sure how this will all shake out, but I think it's pretty realistic to say that those, that 8.3 gigawatts, which is about 7 Seabrooks, that is not a power source that we're going to be getting anytime soon. And so it leaves the question as to where is the power that we do need. We probably need to increase our power supply by about 50% over the next several years. And it's hard to know where that will come from. There's obviously some capacity for solar to increase in the state if net metering is changed. But I think it's the big question mark is, if you're going to say no to offshore wind, where does New England get its major power supply? In terms of individual bills, I have 5 or 6, and I know there's a couple from my colleagues. There is Senator Avard has a bill on the electric assistant program, and I have one too, but I think we'll end up going with Avard's because it's more comprehensive. And basically what it wants to do is to move it over into the Department of Energy, which would be an appropriate follow-on, I think, from creation of the Department of Energy, and sorting out that anything that is adjudicative stays in the PUC and anything that is regulatory goes over to the DOE. It also, even though, you know, the PUC did the energy assistance, you know, they set it for the next 5 years last year or 3 years, and so that it's in place. But Avard's bill, as did mine, made sure that there was protection for the program and some adjustments to the amount of money that was in it, and some guarantees that that would continue, which has always been the intent of the legislature. So there is that one. The industrial host bill that Sununu vetoed is back, and has the fix that is needed to it. I can't recall whether that's a Lang bill or an Avard bill, but that one is coming forward. Then I have a bill on the limitations on customer generators that will modify the scope and essentially increase the capacity limits of community solar projects, so that they'd be more likely to have investors who want to come in. So they increase the amount, the size, and it also would ensure that group net metering members can sign agreements with multiple group hosts. So they have, you know, we've in that kind of funny fix where if they're a customer generator, they can't also sign up to be a member of other group hosts. And also opens up the political subdivision allowed, expands it to include not-for-profits, and removing previous specification about special purpose entities. I think there's some problems with this bill. I've gone over it with Josh Elliott and some other and some of the advocates, and I think that the core here is if we can increase the size of up to 3 megawatts, and then maybe increase the size of individual projects and the pilots, that's the core of what might be accomplished on that side. Then Senator Avard has a pretty interesting bill on power purchase agreements for electric distribution utilities. You remember that after the natural gas spikes a few years ago, we put in the capacity for a gigawatt of procurement. And this really opens it up quite a bit to not just renewable and new sources, but existing sources, and also increases really takes off the limits. Instead of up to 2 million megawatt hours or 2 gigawatts, that it just strikes that, and it can be any size as long as it's reasonable and just. I haven't really had a chance to talk about this, but I'm wondering whether this has something to do with maybe potentially Seabrook, because when Governor Healy's deal with Millstone down in Connecticut fell apart, and I talked to Healy and Lieutenant Governor O'Brien considerably about these things, that they then might turn to try to do long-term power purchase agreements with Seabrook. And, you know, Healy said to me, well, we really ought to talk to the New Hampshire governor. Well, yeah, I guess, because let's say they went in and bid for long-term contracts for procurement for a lot more Seabrook power. That's half of our power. And what protection would we have other than trying to outbid them? So what this would let us, from what I can tell in Avard's bill, is that it would let New Hampshire get into the game of longer-term procurement with Seabrook and maybe other entities as well, to kind of protect our interests in those energy sources. Then just the last couple of things I'll talk about is in terms of long-term storage. So this is a kind of a two bills. It was going to be one, but I decided it should go into two. Set up a task force to look at long-term storage, and this is basically 24-hour plus. And it obviously is going to be the future of resilience and reliability. for renewables certainly, but also just in terms of reliability of the grid itself. We have the form batteries coming on, and I don't know if people have looked into the newest battery technology, the so-called flow batteries, which are chemicals and have a membrane that the ions move back and forth. It produces no heat. They have immense capacity, more than 24 hours, maybe even several days long, and can be huge. It's expensive to make the chemicals. There is a startup company that has a lot of funding right now to do it. And so if these come online and get to scale, this could be, the battery of the future. So I think there's a lot for us to look at. Then more particularly, I have a bill that would allow a pilot program for battery storage, that if you can demonstrate through the pricing achieved that you can save customers money by bringing in cheap power and putting out as expensive power, that then you could have some recoverable expenses on the creation of the battery storage. This might be particularly relevant to the 150 megawatts that are planned over at Newington, and I guess the equivalent or maybe more over at Merrimack. So that would set up a pilot program that would let that happen. And I think it's good form, because I think that the way the bill is put together, it kind of brackets off any concern about this being a cost shift to other folks. The last one I'll talk about is I have a microgrid bill, and this is kind of modeled after the main microgrid bill that passed a couple of years ago, and it would allow companies to set up microgrids, and not just for customer generators for use of power on their own site, but they could then send the power across municipal lines to another facility. They could build transmission. They could cross public roadways over or under, and they could also provide the power to sites like municipalities or hospitals or critical infrastructure or data centers, whatever. And like the main bill, it says, here's the definition of it. If it meets that definition and all the environmental things, utilities get to object if they think that it reproduces existing transmission structure. But if you meet those criteria, the PUC has to approve it. I've also added into that the small nuclear. And there is another couple small nuclear bills in the House, but I thought that, and I talked to Vose about this, I think their definition is inadequate. I'm using the definition from the National Laboratory, which says 300 megawatts, and the House bill has 80 to 90, which I think is too small and doesn't really imagine what, I mean, the Google folks are looking at 345 megawatt size, but 300 seems to me make sense on it. And so it would allow the small nuclear would be included, as well as renewables in the power sources that could be used to power microgrids. And I also include in my definition of critical infrastructure, not just schools, municipalities, police, hospitals, and so forth, but also data centers. There's a lot of folks who are in the state have been talking about potential small nuclear to run data centers at Merrimack, or there's a project that a developer is looking at in Dover, buying a 40-acre site. So anyways, this is all out there. It's a new technology, and I thought we needed some legislation that would put some brackets around it and some definitions. So I will stop there. I hope I didn't go on beyond my time, and I'm sure I've missed quite a few things in the Senate, because I said not all the bills are visible yet.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Senator Waters. No, I don't think you've overstayed your time. In fact, if that's okay, and if you have time, just hang on. I was thinking that maybe we could have three speakers and then have all the questions at the end. Would that work for you? Okay, very good. There are already some questions in the chat, and again, for people listening, do put your questions and comments into the chat, and we will get to them. Thank you very much. And now we will move on to Representative Thomas. What does it look like from your point of view?
Oh my goodness. So as was said, I sit with Tony on science, tech, and energy, although someone referred to it earlier in our committee as energy, energy, and energy. And that seems to be most of the bills that we're addressing. I'll talk about some of the bills that I've already introduced. The Republican leadership has decided which bills they want to kill very quickly up front, and so they're all being scheduled. Last week I had to introduce 9 bills, and it was just a week from hell. House Bill 306, which is John Gage's perennial carbon pricing commission. I decided to put that forward because not only did I think we might have a different administrative leadership on the national level, but you know, sometimes for these kinds of bills, you have to keep the conversation going and you have to keep nibbling at it before things change. I want to remind people that it took us 20 years to get rid of the death penalty. So this carbon pricing commission would have looked at the impact. It wouldn't have made any decisions about how to do carbon pricing in New Hampshire, but the impact of incoming carbon pricing from the 75 countries that already do it to New Hampshire, and the impact on our economy, the impact on our residents, the impact on our health, and sort of looking at it holistically. I got slammed with the discussion on that one because clearly all I was trying to do was create a carbon tax. And I made very specific, I was very clear not to even mention the tax word, but that was already voted down. We already had an executive session on that and it was voted down. The second bill that I introduced was 526, which was to create a dedicated division within DES to look at climate change and climate damage. You know, we live in New Hampshire. We're not stupid. We can look out the window and see the impact of climate change on our state and on our economy. We're getting coastal flooding. We're getting because the summer air is hotter, so it holds more moisture, which is why we're getting these incredible monsoon rainstorms that are washing out roads left and right, you know, which are taking a lot of money to repair. We're not getting the snow in the winter, so our tourist industry is hurting. Our lakes are getting warmer in the summer, so we've got cyanobacteria. So the tourist population in the summer is being hurt. The feedback I got on that, and we already voted on it, it's already dead. The feedback I got on that is, and I can't believe this in 2025, climate change is a hoax. It's a talking point of the Democrats. There's no damage in New Hampshire from climate change. And the reason we have temperature fluctuations is because of seasons. You know, how can you even argue back against that? Because they're not listening to reason. They're just, you know, sticking to their talking points. So that one was already voted down. Another bill I introduced last week was House Bill 96, which is to bring the building energy codes from 2018 to 2021. Last term, we moved all of the building codes up to 2021 with the exception of energy. So I'm working with the Building Code Review Board, and they're currently looking at 2024. And I would love to say that we would, you know, move them up to 2024, but we seem to be 3 years behind on the codes, and they have to be blessed by the BCRB board anyway. So I think one of the biggest things is that the building lobbyists in New Hampshire presented that if we moved a building from 2018 and implemented 2021 codes, that it would put $17,000 additional on the price tag. And that's not true. We got people in on the side that is promoting these, and the increase is really $2,300, and it saves approximately $500 a year in energy costs. The resale value of the house increases if it's got, better resiliency. So the committee actually listened to that one, and they sent it to a subcommittee. So I think that one has a chance. Another bill that and this is not an energy bill, but that I introduced was House Bill 167, which last term, Karen Ebel presented a PFAS bill that banned products that had intentionally added PFAS components to them. One of the categories that we couldn't get through was ski, board, and boat wax. And part of that was because our governor at the time was very involved in the ski industry, and he wasn't interested in any kind of pushback to ski paraphernalia. So this time that has been introduced, it's a no-brainer bill, because these products are in the bottoms of skis and boats and everything, and they're putting PFAS directly into our water supply. And in New Hampshire, we carry non-PFAS wax, and so it really is a no-brainer. But I don't know what's going to happen with that one. In our committee, we also today we heard a bill to get rid of offshore wind power. There's going to be another one that is going to be trying to do that. Of course, Trump signed an executive order, which is being challenged legally, to sort of ban or stop offshore wind power. So we're not quite sure. I think this was mentioned earlier. We're not quite sure how the work that we do fits in with the EOs that are coming out, and some of them are just being, as I said, challenged right away. There is going to be a discussion. I think it's just a committee or a commission to set up to remove New Hampshire from ISO New England, which is insane. But the reason I think that they want to go forward with that is there's the continued discussion from the Free Staters that New Hampshire secede from the United States. And we can't secede if we're part of a regional grid. So I think that that's why that conversation keeps coming up, because it just doesn't make any sense. We couldn't divorce ourselves from the grid like that without having tremendous headaches. You can't force Seabrook to only give its power to New Hampshire. So they're going to try, but I don't think that one's going to go very far. We actually heard a bill today about small nuclear devices. That is really on the top list of interested things that the Republicans seem to be. It's going to be interesting because one of the people, and I forget the company he's with, it's the only small nuclear industry that is currently in New Hampshire. And I'm sure those of you in energy know who I'm talking about. But basically the intent of the bill is to allow nuclear devices, small nuclear devices throughout New Hampshire, and to open the doors to New Hampshire for nuclear business. Hey, we're open for business. Come on up. And the guy with the small nuclear business right now mentioned Bitcoin, and that to me just raises a huge red flag. I mean, are we going to be inviting all of these industries into New Hampshire to set up these Bitcoin mining operations that are going to use tremendous power, that's going to take power away from the rest of the state to invest in this Bitcoin operation? And are we going to, AI is also using a lot of energy as well. So are we just going to become, energy farming industries in New Hampshire? So there's a lot going on. This is our second week, so we haven't heard a lot of the bills yet. Tony's got a couple that he's going to talk about. But unlike what David said, we're voting almost entirely down party lines. We're not seeing the bipartisanship that that you apparently see in the Senate. I wish we could see it, but we're not seeing anything. So
Great.
I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Thomas. Excellent, and we'll just move straight on to Tony, if that's fine. Representative Kaplan. Actually, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I forgot I was on mute. Ryan, Mark, can you hear me?
There you go. Yep, perfect. Thanks very
Okay.
much.
First of all, I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and thank my colleagues, Wendy and David Waters, Senator Waters, for their contributions, their excellent contributions. Ryan, I remember last year we had a Beauties and the Beasts Zoom, so I thought I would follow that template, start out with the Beauties. These aren't just energy bills. These are just, environment, shoreline protection, water bills that I thought, deserve our support. And along those lines, I just want to mention how valuable the support of the New Hampshire Network is for especially this session, where we're going to be up against some Republican intransigence, as people have already mentioned. And as long as we can show that we've got the grassroots behind us, that's a victory for us. So keep engaged and pay attention and stay engaged in the process. This is what democracy is all about. It's going to be a tough couple of years. So first, I wanted to start off with a couple water protection bills. And the first one is HB 105. This is Rosemary Rung, and it's on cyanobacteria. She wants to create a conservation license plate with the fees going to the Cyanobacteria Mitigation Fund that she helped set up last session. And so we know that cyanobacteria blooms are, an increasing problem in our state with warmer summers. So we're going to need a mitigation fund that's well funded. And so I think that's a great idea to use the conservation license plate to feed that fund. And so our towns can start fighting back and start trying to mitigate against the cyanobacteria problem. That bill has an executive session tomorrow in the Transportation Committee. Second bill on water protection is also Rosemary Rung, HB 422, and this increases penalties for violations of the Shoreland Protection Act. I see it around here. We have houses going up along the shores, and you just wonder, how did that get a permit? There's got to be some kind of laws. There's got to be some kind of protections for our shoreland and our water, our important lakes and ponds in the state. And so this bill would increase the protection for those by increasing the penalties for the violations. And that one has an executive session Wednesday this week in the Resource and Recreation Committee. So that one's being voted on. Next, I wanted to talk about some landfill bills, and I wanted to shout out to some of the people I can see on the Zoom here. My former colleague, Sherry Dutsey on the Environment and Agriculture Committee, John Swan, other people who are longtime activists on the landfill front. So these are some bills that might find a path forward, because I think we do have some bipartisan consensus on the need to do something about our landfill crisis in the state. So the first one is HB 566 FN. This is a Nick Germana bill. And this one would require new permits for landfills to have a leachate management plan. And so we know that leachate is a perennial problem with landfills and what to do with the leachate. So any new permits would have to have a plan going along with the new application, showing how they'll deal with leachate collection, transportation, disposal, and any contingency plans for emergencies, such as, the leachate getting out of the collection ponds or wherever they collect it and starting to get into the groundwater. The next bill is HB 215 FN, also Nick Germana. It requires new landfill permits to include a report on all potential harms and benefits to the surrounding communities. And these impacts would include human health, property values, tourism, recreational wildlife, noise, odor, traffic, groundwater pollution, greenhouse gas and other emissions, air emissions emanating from the facilities. So this is a great idea, requiring new plans to include a report on all the potential harms and benefits that come with the landfill. So, and the cost borne by that, the cost of that study would have to be borne by the applicant, not the state. So another good side to that bill. This one has a work session Tuesday tomorrow in Environment and Agriculture. Finally, on landfill, there's a House Resolution, House Resolution 13, which is not a binding legislation. It's just showing the opinion of the House, and this is a resolution sponsored by Jared Sullivan opposing the Forest Lake State Park landfill, which is the perennial problem of the siting of a landfill right next to Forest Lake in our North Country. So that one has a public hearing tomorrow, in Environment and Agriculture. There's a couple of good recycling related bills that I thought I would mention. The first one is HB 451 FN. This is a Karen Ebel bill. It has some bipartisan support, so it has a good chance of going forward. This would set up a paint recycling program called the Paint Products Stewardship Program, and it would require manufacturers of paint and their representatives in New Hampshire to set up some kind of program, including collection sites with fees added to the paint cans to cover the costs associated with the program to collect recycled paint. So that's a great idea. It also embodies some of the, producer responsibility, extended producer responsibilities for their products, which is a good move going forward. And finally, I just wanted to mention one bill, House Resolution 10, which is Nick Germana's bill to recognize the fundamental right that we all have to a clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment. That one needs no explanation. It's sort of a conceptual, bill. I don't think this would have any sort of legislative impact, but it would certainly show the state's intent to recognize that fundamental right. And so that one does not have any public hearing scheduled yet. So finally, I'm going to move on to some energy bills. I think Wendy mentioned her climate change division in the Department of Environmental Services. That one got shut down. My bill, HB 106, which was intending to set up a commission to look at the cost of climate damage in the state and looking at the best ways to recoup those costs. That one met a similar fate. It went down 10-8 in our executive session. So that one, I would call it a spirited debate, but it was more than that. I think the Republicans reverted to their playbook of basically denying that there is such a thing as climate change. They had a couple contrarian pseudo-scientists, I would call them, come in, and one of them claimed that there's no need to try to measure the impact of carbon in the atmosphere because it's such a small portion of the atmosphere. So it would be futile to try to determine the impacts of carbon. And so obviously that's a pretty contrarian opinion. And then their other so-called expert, Mike Sununu, representing himself, came in and used one chart from the IPCC report. It's a 3,000-page report. He showed one chart on time of emergence data, which is a new field in climate science, which doesn't have all the data that it needs from all around the world to show extreme certainty on a global scale. So he wanted to use that chart to imply that that we don't have the certainty about the impacts of climate change on our climate, when in fact, that is the exact opposite thrust of that entire 3,000-page report. We have extremely high certainty in our region of increased extreme precipitation events, extreme heat days, lower snowpack, increased extent and duration of storm surges on the seacoast with rising sea levels and increased storm intensity. So all these things are known entities that we're going to be facing in the future. The Republicans just don't want to think about it. They have their fingers in their ears and they refuse to act responsibly on this issue. So that one, we'll still have a debate on the floor of the House, but it's going to be an uphill battle. Other energy bills are mostly bad news, as Wendy mentioned, in the House on our committee anyways. Today we heard House Bill 221. This is a Michael Harrington bill. It's intending to relitigate the cost effectiveness of the system benefits charge. The system benefits charge is used to fund the New Hampshire Saves program in the state. New Hampshire Saves works on energy efficiency, insulation, energy efficient appliances, and so has a tremendous economic impact on the state. It's a benefit to the entire state to have this program, and they want to relitigate the system's benefits charge, which funds this program. And so they want to claim that that we don't look fully at the benefits and the costs when we come to this test of the system benefits charge. And so they want to reopen this in front of the PUC. which is in effect reopening a can of worms that's already been litigated. There's already been a docket on it, and we came to a decision just a couple of years ago, which allowed the New Hampshire SAVES program to move ahead. So we're fighting that one. We had a good debate today, and I think we were successful in making our point that that would be a silly thing to do. Next bill, also we heard today, was HB 224. This is the Janine Notter bill to take all the money from the Reggie allowance payments, which go into something called the Renewable Energy Fund, which funds mainly two programs in the state: wood pellet boiler grants and community solar. Now, these wood pellet boiler grants are used by municipalities, they're used by schools, they're used by hospitals, they're used by all sorts of facilities that want to use a cheaper form of energy to save their operating costs. And so they rely on this money from the Renewable Energy Fund to kind of kick off their fundraising, and they can bond from that. They can raise money from banks in order to in order to pay for these new wood pellet boilers. This has all kinds of economic impacts for the state. It supports our timber industry, and it also lowers our property taxes, which is a huge plus. As we know, property taxes are a big problem in the state. So instead of that money from the Reggie allowance payments going into Renewable Energy Fund, they want to just rebate it all back to the ratepayers, and we think that's a short-sighted use of those funds. Almost 98% of the funds already get rebated. It's just a small portion of the money that goes into the Renewable Energy Fund. They want to just kill it off completely. So we argued, pretty spiritedly against that as well, and also heard lots of testimony from business owners and other folks across the state that would be a bad idea. Tomorrow we get to hear what I think is one of the real beasts of the year, and it's the same one I talked about last year. It's come back again. HB 504 is Michael Vosa's masterpiece. He wants to rework the state energy policy so that it favors legacy fossil fuel producers in the name of energy security, and would authorize the state to step in and legally go after the federal government if their rules force the closure of these plants. Now, of course, this was a bill that came about, during the Biden administration when the EPA was trying to tighten the rules on natural gas emissions, and so the Republicans saw this as a threat to natural gas plants in our region, and came up with this bill. Of course, the political reality has totally shifted, but they're going forward with this because it makes a statement of, basically, the whole premise of the bill is based on New Hampshire's sovereign right to the energy generated in our state. And of course, that's a fallacy, because the energy that's generated in our state is generated by private companies that sell onto a regional grid, as Wendy mentioned. And so we don't really have a sovereign right to that energy. That energy belongs to the companies that generate it, and they sell it to the highest bidder. So in a way, it's kind of ironic that the Republicans are sponsoring a bill that, most people would say smacks of socialism, or even worse, some kind of, crazy nationalistic. Well, it's the people who want to secede from the Union, basically. Wendy mentioned the bill to kill offshore wind. We actually have three bills like that. HB 578, Kelly Potenza has got a bill to prohibit offshore wind energy infrastructure development in New Hampshire, repeal the Office of Offshore Wind Industry Development and Energy Innovation, repeal the Workforce Development and Innovation Fund. I need to say this is a short-sighted, heavy-handed, anti-market, anti-business, anti-working class bill. The offshore wind industry represents job opportunities. It represents business development. It's just crazy that this has become a culture war issue, that somehow, because Donald Trump hates windmills, that we're going to go along with this. And even though, Trump's executive order does mean that there's probably going to be very little new investment, it still pays the state to stay involved in the research and planning efforts in the Gulf of Maine. So I think it's crazy to shut down any offshore wind office or any engagement of the state in the development of offshore wind. ISO New England ISO New England runs the regional grid, estimates that we need 18 gigawatts of offshore wind to meet our energy needs in the next couple of decades. Luckily, we already have over 6 gigawatts signed, sealed, and almost delivered in southern New England offshore waters, but we still have plenty more to do in the Gulf of Maine, and we should stay involved in that. There's another bill, HB 682 by Michael Harrington, also the same thing, eliminate offshore wind. And Doug Thomas, the vice chair of my committee, has a House continuing resolution also rejecting offshore wind off the coast of New Hampshire. So they have a plethora of bills trying to kill offshore wind. It's one of their boogeymen, I guess now. So we're going to fight that. Nick Germana's got a great energy bill. It's not in our committee. It's HB 278. It's a proxy carbon pricing bill intending to mandate that the New Hampshire Department of Administrative Services set up a proxy carbon price when they're making their purchases in terms of transportation and building, heating and cooling costs for all new construction and renovations. So that faces an uphill battle. As we know, the Republicans probably hate carbon pricing more than they hate windmills. It's a long time boogie for them. So, but that's one we should support. And I will mention one bill of mine. It's HB 674 on non-wire alternatives. This is a utility reform bill to incentivize our default utilities, Eversource, Unitil, the electric co-op, community power, to make more investments in distributed generation resources, which are basically solar and wind and battery resources, through the integrated distribution legislation, section 378. Distributed generation, when it's sited next to where the load is, can really lower transmission and distribution costs and result for lower rates for everybody on the grid. So this bill would also incentivize time of use data sharing and smart meters. So I'm working with Eversource at the moment, trying to work up some amendments and ways to go forward with this bill. There's no public hearing yet, but that is a possible good bill to get behind. And with that, I'll bring my comments to a close, Rainmar, and move it over back to you.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Senator Kaplan. Really appreciate that. It's awesome. I mean, it's it's hard to hear the flood of beasts that you had to end with. It's tough going. There's no question about it. But we appreciate all of your work and your contributions that are incredibly valuable to all of us. Now let's move to some of the questions that we've got in the chat here. And maybe John and Susan, you can chime in as well if you see something that would be of particular interest. Yes.
Just right now, Reinhard, 3 people have written in about what is the most effective way for us to register our opinions. That Chairman Vos was saying that the online testimony is not credible. Is that an opinion that people hold to? Is it better for us to just email committee members, do all of the above, phone calls, postcards? How do we get the most oomph for our little voices?
Wendy has a comment.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this. We actually were talking about this at lunch today with a new rep. What is not effective are those bulk emails, and they actually say bulk in them. So we tend to not pay attention to those. At least I don't, because it's the same email over and over and over. I personally think that emails are important, as long as they're very clear and you put your position at the top. I support, I oppose, so that I know what I'm scanning, and make them short and sweet. Don't pack too much information in on them. But I was talking with Lucius this afternoon also, and the most effective thing is to show up for testimony, testify, and then send us your written testimony. And that is the most important thing. Don't call me, because if my phone doesn't recognize your phone number, for my own personal safety, I don't pick up the phone. Many of us are getting threats. So I don't do that anyway. Others might. And I have never gotten a postcard to say, please vote for something, but Kent Street has sent me postcards thanking me for my work on a bill, and those are tremendous, so that's not what you're asking, but sending or, an email even, attaboy, or we appreciate your work, or that kind of stuff goes a really long way.
Wendy, when you started out, you were talking about emails, and were you talking specifically about emails directly to you? Because we're also wondering about the online testimony. Right?
Yeah, so I was talking about emails to me and to you. There's a function you can do it to the entire committee. Online testimony, I mean, that's where you log in and you say whether you oppose it or you don't oppose it. And it's interesting, but half the time they're not making it mandatory that they report those numbers anymore. So unless we remember to say them, we don't hear them. And as we've seen, I was in the voucher hearing, and something like 3,600 people were opposed, 700 people were for it. They don't care, So, I think that that's an important number for, for publicizing and for getting the information out. But I'm not sure that it's making a difference on the other side. And I'm sorry that I'm so pessimistic. It's just, it kind of comes with a job, I think, this term.
Yeah. One follow-up, and maybe, Tony and Senator Waters can also chime in on this, but there are several degrees of online testimony, as it were. I mean, you can just note that you were opposed or supporting the bill. You can also write a paragraph. You can also upload a whole, PDF, which is usually more extensive. Does that make any difference, do you think, to people?
Let me just say on the Senate side, because we do things so differently than the House, coming to the hearing is key. Hearing from constituents. So if you have somebody who's actually a constituent, I will pay attention to that email much more than other ones. I mean, I look at everything. And then people make appointments with us and come in. And people call me on the phone. So the emails, the mass emails, the sending of documents, if you send it to the committee aide, it gets distributed in the hearing, usually. But there's just five of us who work very quickly. So the more in person, the better.
Yeah, I would echo those. I mean, obviously in person is the highest priority, but not everybody has the luxury to do that. Secondly, would just be signing in online to show your support or opposition. And I'm not sure how helpful the online, paragraph submissions or the PDFs are. I mean, if we have 100 paragraphs to read, it's very likely that most of those will not be read by the people who need to read them. So by all means, share your personal stories, share your sentiments on those online submissions. But if you really have a good story to tell, come on in and tell it in person, because that really carries a lot of weight.
We have had the experience already of bills that had 104 supporters and 5 opposed, and they went down. So it can be discouraging, but I also wonder whether in the long term, if we have that a lot, will people start to see that? Will legislators start to notice that this is extremely asymmetrical, and will it start to be difficult for them to continue to ignore that asymmetry?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the experience that we had with Forest Lake, for instance, that bill in my first session in the House, we totally turned that around because of the grassroots support. So it can happen. The grassroots can drive the process, but it has to be a fairly massive, groundswell of support or opposition.
So another thing that we're talking about in our committee, again, which is Science, Tech, and Energy, is that, I mean, we're trying to hold the tide back with a spoon. We're not going to get many things passed that the Republicans don't want us to pass. So we're calling in the guns. We're calling in the press to come to the hearings. We're going to be holding press conferences. We're going to be distributing press releases, you know, so that's where, you know, we can grab stories that we get through email. We can grab the numbers that we get through email, and we can disseminate it to people and let people know that, you know, this bill was heard and the majority of people feel this way, or, you know, these were the arguments against it. So we're sort of brainstorming on how to creatively educate people about what's going on. So the emails are very important with that regard, in that aspect.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
and
it's
I've been asking for online testimony for climate bills the last couple of weeks in the hopes of using the online testimony numbers in op-eds and letters to the editor. And I have submitted several and they keep getting rejected because I think I'm being a little too harsh on some of the members. So I need to tone it down a little bit. But I think showing a pattern of ignoring the public input is going to make the public frustrated with what's going on. As I know I am watching what goes on, and you must be going through it also. But I think everybody would get frustrated when they see public input just being ignored.
I mean, this is a democratic process. This is the one tool we have in our disposal right now, is just to keep banging the drum on whatever, you know, pick your pet bill, pick your pet issue, you know, and just get your friends around and just write your letters, come to the you know, in-person testimony, submit your online opposition, whatever it is, do everything. You know, it's like throwing spaghetti at a wall. Eventually something's going to stick. What else? That's all we can do.
Someone in the chat talked about, do we get sick of having the same people come and testify over and over? No, actually, that shows that you're passionate and that you have a command of the topic. No, I respect that. So
Sherry Dutsey wanted to say something also. I don't know if we can sneak that in.
yes, Sherry, please.
Yeah, I wanted to underscore what Senator Waters said about listening to constituents. I went through the list of the 400 representatives, and I identified approximately what I would call maybe 23 new Republican representatives that I would say are, I'll call them in purple districts. Okay, they took over a Democratic seat, or they're in a district that has elected Democrats in the past. So they're not the ruby red gerrymandered districts. My feeling is what we need to do is we need to identify constituents in their district, hopefully independents, or better yet, Republicans, that are willing to contact them about these bills, because that's the only way we're going to hopefully try to get some of them converted or persuaded. Because even if these bills get through the committee, bills that we want, they still go to the floor. Okay, so if this representative in a purple district, okay, can be contacted by 2 or 3 or 4 constituents, that's a lot, because I think all of us know, okay, that we don't get contacted by a lot of constituents. We get contacted by a lot of people. They may live in Missouri or Washington or wherever, but we don't necessarily get, or I'm speaking in the past, haven't gotten messages from constituents. But when you do, you tend to listen. And since these people are in districts that are not ruby red and are not secured, they might be persuadable. So, I mean, I have the list, I can distribute it to people. You know, it needs to get out there, and people need to identify and contact people who are willing to contact their Republican legislator and ask them to vote a certain way on a bill. Thank you.
Yeah, I will say, thank you, Sherry. I will say John Swan, who's on this Zoom as well, is one of the grassroots experts, and you know, any strategy that you can get from him is a good strategy.
Will do.
So another strategy that we're using in our committee, we tried to use it last term, and it's even going to be more important this term. They're just like babies, and they fall asleep. So when we're up at the well, we're trying to speak to the press because we can't convince anybody when we're up there. I mean, everybody knows how they're going to vote. So we try to have very short speeches with about sound bites that the press can use. And that's just another strategy that we're putting together for this.
So,
Speaking to the press.
Reimer, if I may just comment, I think the Senate will be able to contain a lot of the bad stuff that comes over the House. It will be complicated because if it's passed the House, they can then put it on our bills and try to put things into the budget. So we shall see about that process. But I do think there will be a lot of resistance in the Senate to some of the more extreme things. Also in the Senate, in terms of how we respond, we work a lot with the utilities, we work a lot with the Department of Energy, work a lot with Clean Energy New Hampshire, Nature Conservancy, and other constituents, and they're coming in has an important impact because they have relationships with each of the senators that they have developed over years. If I may quickly address some of the things in the chat, I will take another look at Senate Bill 55. It seemed to be a limited thing that made some sense, but I didn't realize the implications of it. I will take another look at that. In terms of other ways to save money, you know, the election came and a lot of things I was going to do, I kind of held off on. I think we can get substantial money into the cyanobacteria issues if we put a little more onto the oil importation fee and designated for this. I'm on the oil fund board, and we put the, you know, a few cents per gallon of everything that comes in. There could be some real money in that could go to that, but I decided to hold off on that one. I think we also can save a lot of money on electricity by grid enhanced technology. And I've talked to the utilities about this, and I've worked with some folks around the country. There's ways to increase the capacity of existing transmission lines, sometimes by 50% by using these new technologies, which help regulate the flows through existing technologies. So you don't have to build new technology. Let's see what else. I think there's some other things in the chat. Oh, and the small nuclear. Look, I'm very skeptical about them. I don't see how the levelized cost of energy, even Google, which has a lot of orders in their talking, it's going to be 10 years before they come online. If they're at the 80 megawatt size, you need more than 100 of them to deal with the 8.3 gigawatts in the Gulf of Maine. But I think it's also strategic to be open to new technologies, as I have asked people to be open to offshore wind technologies and microgrids and other kinds of things. I think it's somewhat strategic to say to the House folks who are thinking it's the be all and end all to have more nuclear. Well, let's look into it. We'll see how it plays out. I also thought it was important to make sure we start incorporating it into our legislative definitions. I have been interested in talking with some legislators in Texas and in Nevada and Utah and elsewhere about whether we do need to put some regulations around the energy for the data centers and Bitcoin. I also think that New Hampshire is too small a fish on this. I've talked to some of the people who've come in and looked up at Berlin. They're looking at Merrimack, they're looking at other places where there's any interconnection. And I think they just think New Hampshire is too small and doesn't have enough capacity. But I think we may need to look at some rules that say that the energy supply should be prioritized to things that keep people warm and keep the economy going, rather than to the Bitcoin manufacturing. And that might be the way to protect some of our existing power supply. But again, that's maybe for next year and some of them, maybe for a few years hence when we have a different political environment.
Yeah.
Are you at all worried about SMRs or the promise of SMRs soaking up funding that could be possibly flowing to other more likely sources, energy sources?
Oh, I think you look at, I mean, there's a lot of hedge, I will say this, there's been a lot of hedge fund, a lot of big money interested in the small nuclear, and you can look at the stocks. But when China announced today about that new chip, right? It's not just NVIDIA that cratered 20%, right? But you look at all the nuclear and the power companies that have been playing on the need for AI and for data centers, their stocks took a huge hit too. So that the kind of notion that these data centers and the power supply is going to be this huge cornucopia and all the money is going to flow into it, I think we got to think again. So it seems to me that there's still a lot of money flowing into alternative energy sources and other technologies, into solar, you name it. So I'm pretty skeptical that we have to worry about all this stuff too much. I think that the technologies that are going to deliver the kind of power that, I mean, there's a lot of bubbles out there, and I think the AI and the small nuclear might have been a kind of an investment bubble for a while, and we'll see how things settle out.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes, Susan, go ahead.
Just way near the top, Mary Woodward had a question about the 50% increase you think we're going to need in power, David, and also the interaction with that and time sensitive rates. Mary, I don't know if I got that correct.
Yeah, we have, I think there's a Senate bill that's, I mean, I know that some of the Community Power Coalition has always wanted to have time sensitive rates. And I think there is, I was going to put in a big incentive bill on getting Eversource finally to do the metering. I think there is another bill that is in about that. Yes, I mean, I think clearly that there will be lots and lots of ways to save money. I think that the general framework of talking about resilience and reliability is really talking about storage. And if we can, look at time sensitive rates and do storage, I think we might really be able to have an impact there. But nevertheless, if we are going to electrify our economy, I think despite Trump, we're going to see EVs coming on like gangbusters. I think, heat pumps. I mean, I think we're still going to electrify the economy despite Trump. And so we need more power.
Yeah, I mean, I think
those power is likely to be
are
clean
important.
energy sources too. I really do. I just don't see the investment in, are we going to build a 800 megawatt gas fired plant in New Hampshire? I doubt it.
Okay, now Sarah Thorne asked though if
Well, hang on, Susan.
Sure.
Tony just wanted to add something to that.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to agree with David that meeting our energy demand is going to take in all of the above strategy, and time of use, time sensitive rates, all those things that lower our demand are going to help. It's not the silver bullet, but it's going to help with the problem for sure. And we need to look into try to incentivize that.
Yeah. Susan, go ahead.
Oh, well, just a comment from Sarah Thorne. We must require a credible plan for safely handling the nuclear waste before we authorize any new plants. Any comments on that?
Yeah, that was one of the questions I asked the business representative that Wendy Thomas mentioned. Is I think it's StarCube. It's a nuclear startup based in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and he claims that they're 5 years away from having a workable design ready to be built in New Hampshire, which seems kind of far-fetched. And so I asked him, I said, well, what's your pitch on the waste? Because this was in relation to a bill to try to define clean energy, to include nuclear energy. And, I agree that nuclear is non-carbon, so therefore it could meet the definition of clean, but it's not really clean because it has radioactive waste associated with it. So he said, his pitch was that they can deal with the waste by sinking it into, deep earth, sort of pits, and so that is a feasible way. I don't know. I'm not an expert on nuclear waste. So
Well, I'll say, the elusive Yucca Flats, right? And I will say, I haven't been to Seabrook. They've got that big cement platform there that put the dry cast storage, and there's still a lot of room there. But the Federal Nuclear Regulatory Commission handles waste, and embedded in our statute from 1955, whenever they did it, is all of this that governs it. So I just think this is something that's going to play out. We're not going to be storing a lot more nuclear waste from these things in New Hampshire. So they're going to have to figure that out.
Reinmar, I see a good question from Krishma. Going back to the House Science, Technology, and Energy bills that have been discussed and exec already, there was doubt among some of the members whether New Hampshire was incurring any costs from climate change. And it kept occurring to me that we need a state climate scientist in here to answer some of these basic questions. But she asked, have you tried to get support from the tourism industry about the impacts of climate change on their businesses, ski resorts, lakeshore restaurants, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, we had one of our committee members, Thomas Corman, reach out to the ski industry, and he read into the record. He read their position on the damages that they're already seeing due to shortened winters and less snowfall, and their need to pump water, and sometimes there's a drought, so there's not even enough water to pump. So yeah, they are seeing the impacts right now of the changing climate. There's no doubt, and we did have some of that testimony.
Yeah. Also, I've worked with the UNH Cooperative Extension, and they're doing a lot of work around collecting climate information and for the farmers specifically. And then I have been able to visit twice now, and I stay in touch with the folks at Mount Washington, and they just put up I think 7 or 9 new weather stations. So they're collecting information on both sides of the mountain. So an application of this weather collection that they can tell the ski mountains, don't make snow on Tuesday because a warming front is coming in, wait till Thursday, it's going to be more effective. So and that was sort of the idea behind my bill, to have a dedicated department within DES. I mean, somebody's got to collect and wrangle all of this information that we're collecting around the state and keep it in one repository. But as I said, it was voted down.
Yeah, I just felt like when I was sitting there listening to some of the members of this there testifying would have really maybe helped, or even departments of this costs. Here's the climate assessment report from our
Yeah,
climate.
all of that might have helped, and the more testimony is always good. But that conclusion was baked in. They had their contrarian experts, as I mentioned at the start, and they just needed a couple people to cast the doubt, use some of that misinformation from the fossil fuel industry, and then they could claim, well, we don't know what reality is. It could be going up, it could be going down. There's been doubt thrown into the mix.
Of a fossil fuel lobbyist and a toxicologist about climate change, but maybe you should hear from a climate scientist, or at least consult the
wary of.
I think you have to be very careful about that. And we actually had a case today where a testifier got up and basically said that the previous testifier was not telling the truth.
Right.
And that's frowned upon. I mean, that's bad manners. That's not, and the previous testifier now doesn't have a way to defend themselves and put forward. So I think that you can use strategy and sort of counter the message that the previous testifiers have spoken without attacking them personally.
Yeah, you can just use better data basically and say, here's some better information for you. This is,
But the thing that Tony said is the answer, or the resolution, is baked into it. I mean, they were not interested in hearing anything about climate change. In fact, this weekend, I spent some time and I had to wash my eyes out with bleach on the Heartland Institute website, which is where they get all of their talking points. And it's cultish. I mean, none of it is scientific. And it's just insane, but they are wed to that. And Tony, during the discussion of one of the bills, I mean, basically he threw his hands up and he's like, when did this become such a partisan issue? You know, and it is straight down party lines. And I don't have the answer to that. I don't know when science became a partisan issue. And, you know, we're seeing an impact to our economy, which is what the Republicans are all about. And they don't even care about that. So it's very, very frustrating.
So
Yeah.
Pat Martin wants to know if you can make any predictions about the prospects for New Hampshire saves, which I guess Mr. Harrington is attacking. Will it have a second chance in the Senate? Will it survive the House?
Yeah, that was the bill we heard today. I think we had very, very strong testimony in favor of not moving forward with that bill. So I think that's an interesting one to watch. Are the Republicans going to die on that mountain? Because they've done that before and it was considered overreach and they got, you know, they suffered for it. That was 3 years ago when they tried to kill New Hampshire saves. So I think that one is one where we might have a little bit of a victory there when it comes to the executive session, but I would stay tuned.
All right. Well, we're coming to the point where we're going to start turning into pumpkins. I just wanted to turn, because we've been talking a lot about nuclear. There is, well, first I should say, everybody who's listening should copy the chat, because there's a lot of things in there, very useful links, some very good and useful information from a lot of other people on the call. So I recommend keeping track of that. And I just wanted to return to one bill that I think hasn't been mentioned, which is 707. And Adam Finkel had written a note. Adam, do you want to talk for just a minute or so about that bill? Because I don't think it's gotten coverage yet today, this evening. Adam, are you there? Maybe he left. Do you guys know
I know
Tony
a
and
little bit about
Wendy?
that bill. Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
bill to redo the landfill siting rules. And we had that bill last year. And Sherry might remember this one. It was to, you know, right now the setback is 200 feet, you know, from a source of groundwater. And so the bill was to increase the setback and try to use more scientific data in terms of groundwater flows and the geology around that landfill instead of just some kind of one size fits all. 200 feet, that's good. You know, you're good to go. So I think that's the bill that Adam's talking about.
Mm-hmm. And is there any chance of that moving forward, do you think?
You know, that one did not pass last year. It was very, very close. But the Republicans held firm against it. I don't really know what the
Yeah.
chance
Well,
is.
it always interests me that's, you know, New Hampshire is such an outlier when it comes to this. You know, I mean, in terms of states in our nation, in terms of, you know, global point of view, as Adam points out, it's very odd, you know, and it seems like it should be another no-brainer. But okay, we'll
It's
see
not
what
very odd. It's
happens.
you know, the dollar talks, everything else walks. It's all about the money.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And someone in the
All right.
chat mentioned, I think it was David actually, the EPA is rolling back regulations on PFAS. And I've spent years and years and years trying to educate people about PFAS and hold our polluter in Merrimack accountable. And people are going to get sick and they're going to die. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Well, on that note, I
Sorry.
would like to. That's fine. You're absolutely right.
Puppies and
I want to
kittens.
move. I want to move to Susan's coming attractions intro. So Susan, maybe you can set that up, and while you do so, John also will leave 5 minutes at the end for you to go over the Gen Court website for anybody who's curious about how it works and how to you know, make use of it.
Okay, I'm going to go quick. so we can hear from John. So not only do we rely on the legislature to make things happen, but whoops, here we go. You can, we ask you, please be a part of the plan, the New Hampshire Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. It has 4 more meetings once a month. And the meetings themselves are about 2 hours, which go by really quickly. You get some materials to read. So you really have a chance to learn, both from the materials, from hearing the people in your meeting who are expert. But if you are not expert and you just are curious or have strong feelings, you are welcome. So I don't know if you can remember all this. If you go to the UNH Carsey School, you can find out about the CCAP, or go to DES. Otherwise, here are the 2 email addresses, and we'll keep sending you emails about this as well. And you can be involved with transportation, electrical generation, agriculture and land, buildings, and waste. So there's something for everyone there. And New Hampshire Network's next event will be February 10th. And again, a place for you to do something, learn about what people are doing to decrease plastic in their own communities and what you can do as well. And remember that plastic is Plan B for the fossil fuel industry, so we don't want to encourage them. And here is a petition that the Plastic Working Group of New Hampshire is circulating, asking grocery stores voluntarily to stop giving out free plastic bags. In other New England states, sure, they stopped giving out free single-use plastic bags and just started creating thicker plastic bags. So we don't want that either. But if either really quickly snap on this, or I think you can remember this, bit.ly/no uppercase plastic bags, and sign on the petition. Lots of communities have done this one at a time. We're hoping by blanketing the whole state with the petition that we might get a little more cooperation from the grocery stores who want to seem environmental. And so we invite you, please join New Hampshire Network. We've got working groups, plastics, climate, energy, which has really been helping municipal energy committees. We're very proud of that. Environment, and then legislation we talk about all the time. www.newhampshirenetwork.org will get you all the information you need. So take it away, John. Oops.
Actually, before you start, John, I just want to say to Tony and Wendy, to Rep. Kaplan and Thomas, thank you so much for being here. Senator Waters has already had to leave, but we really, really appreciate all your efforts and your help in letting us understand more about what things look like from the inside. And I'm sure we will see you again. If you want to hang around for John's presentation, of course, you're absolutely welcome. But I thought maybe you might not need it since you're on the inside. But thank you both
I
very
appreciate
much.
your support, and thanks for having me. And you know, I'm sure you're right. We will see each other around very soon.
Very good.
Everything Tony just said. Thank you all.
Thanks very
Thank you
much,
very
both
much.
of you. John, take
Thank
it
you.
away.
Thank you, Remar. I was trying to say that, but I was on mute. So
Oh.
yeah, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go through a couple quick tips on submitting bill testimony and getting around the New Hampshire Network's bill page and the general court's information. So NH Bill Actions is the tab where you can go straight to newhampshirenetwork.org/nh-bills. There's just 5 sections. Bills of interest, how to submit your position online, how to testify in person, how to email written testimony, and a whole bunch of general court resources. Okay, so bills of interest. So this is updated by Sunday based on the House calendar of hearings that will happen the following week. And so the information here is what you need for a particular bill when we ask you to submit online testimony. There's the bill number, the committee name, the date of the hearing, and then some comments why we support or oppose the bill from a network perspective. And you can, of course, make your own mind up whether you agree with this or not. We're just happy to help people learn to engage. And from what we heard, maybe writing a big document to submit in here isn't as good as sending it in email, but I would do both because I know I go online to see testimony that people have submitted. The press can do that also. This is a public forum for testimony, and I'll show you how you can see that later. But in addition to having strong counts in support or opposition from the public for these bills, I think, if you do write something to send an email, please submit it online also. Okay, so let's go to a good bill. Wednesday. Wednesday at, there it is, 278. Okay, so to submit online testimony for HB 278, you can read a little bit about why we support this bill. And then you can take this information and go down to number 2, instructions. It's a House bill. The hearing is in the House. And so you go to the House online testimony page, you enter your information, you enter the date of the bill. Oops. We've already had that day. That's the new one. Select the committee, select the bill. I am a member of the public representing myself. I support this bill. So then you can just hit submit if you want, the button on the bottom, or you can upload a file or type your testimony. Okay, so where does that end up? Well, we can see that. You can see all the testimony. There's a link in section 5 of the New Hampshire Network NH Bills page. View submitted testimony. So you select a committee and you select the bill. And you see, okay, there's 91 members of the public have weighed in support and 3 have opposed. So for this particular bill, it's kind of interesting to see who the outliers are. So those 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this one. So Greg Moore is the New Hampshire State Director of Americans for Prosperity, one of the Koch network funded anti-science, do something about climate change group. So anyway, that's just a little insider information. Okay, so what else do we want to see? Links to bill info on the Gen Court site. Okay, so on the General Court website for each of these bills is a web page or several pages about the bill. You can click on the link there to find the details on the bill. So the prime sponsor, the co-sponsors, information. This is where we get the information. One of the places we get the information on what's coming up that goes on that spreadsheet. The public hearing will be on January 29th at 11:15 in the Legislative Office building. You can see the text. I can never remember. Sometimes you click on docket, sometimes you click on introduced. Oh, while I'm here, you can also subscribe to a bill. So a bill goes through a public hearing, an executive hearing, and then is introduced on the floor for a large vote. If you want to get emailed on the Thursday of the week before that any of those happen, you can subscribe to the bill. And so you just enter your, it's not going to remember my password. Okay, never mind. I was going to show you. It shows you what you've already subscribed to, and you can manage your subscriptions there. Okay, so if you click on Introduced on the bill's webpage, you can actually see the bill text. And there it is. Okay, so next thing, a quick tour of that general court website. So this has just been renamed. It used to be gencourt.something.something. Now it's gc.nh.gov. And at the top level, you can do some nice things like if you know about a bill, HB 278, and you want to find its bill page, you can type it in right there and you get to this, this page. Click on that and it'll go to the page that we were just on. Okay. Let's see, what else can you do from here? So this is where we've found some of the resources. So submitting testimony and viewing it. This is the real system of record source for that kind of stuff. But usually when I'm on here, I'm working on either the House or the Senate page. You can see who your town's state representatives are with that House roster. So you can click on your town. Anybody see Windham? I used to know where it was. There it is. So you can find out who your reps are and find information about them. If they share their phone number or email address, you can get it here. Okay. You can also download the whole roster of all the state representatives. So in Microsoft format is what I use, but you download the data and then you can open up a spreadsheet with it all there, and then you can sort on committee name or any various things. If you want to find the email addresses of all the members in your town, sort on the town name, and then you can get that information very easily. And I'm over 4 minutes. Okay. So I think that's all I wanted to show. Oh, online testimony. One last thing. I did show that. Yeah, okay. So we should each know who our own town reps are and build a relationship with them. And that's another important group that you can show the online testimony counts. Because, you know, if you're one of those people, you can say, hey, I've been working, but I'm submitting testimony online, and it seems like it's not being considered by the people on the committee. And you can use those numbers in LTEs and op-eds, talk with your neighbors. And so, you know, we hear elections have consequences, but so does pollution. And if members are going to keep ignoring public input, there should be consequences for that too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. And one little thing that I'll add is that it might seem complicated the first time or the second time that you go through that process, but actually it remembers all your information, so it becomes very quick actually to do this. You could literally do it in a minute. You can register your support or opposition to a bill, and if you write a short paragraph, then you know that might take another couple of minutes, but it can be done extremely fast. So it's not something that you need to invest a lot of time in. It's more just making the decision to actually go ahead and do it. And you know, if we keep in mind that we're kind of in a long-term you know, set of battles here, even if stuff gets ignored today and tomorrow, maybe next year it might not get ignored, or it might not be as easy to ignore, let's put it that way. And 5 years from now, maybe it'll be really hard. So that's what we're hoping for. So the more of us, the merrier. And with that, I think I'd like to close for this evening. I'm looking forward to seeing you all again quite soon for the Plastics Working Group's presentation in February. And thank you all for being here. And we will see you again. Take care, everybody.